Day 829 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So, starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 508,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1080 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 25 tanks, quite a mammoth figure there, 33 APVs, and a whopping 49 artillery. Then we'll head to the map and start out in Russia today as a significant fire erupted at the Ruskaya compressor station near Anapa, where NASA firm's data identified two intensive blazes. Now, some Telegram groups in the area located the incident, though it was omitted from official Russian media. And so the Ruskaya station is crucial as it marks the beginning of the Turkish Stream gas pipeline. And while the cause of the fire remains unknown, the lack of Russian media insight does remain suspicious, and there is speculation that drones may have been involved. Then we move all the way up on the map to the Belgorod Oblast of Russia, which is quite the activity center right now. As starting off, multiple explosions were reported in the region, with Russian air defenses in the border oblast seen to be quite active. Now, that was likely drone activity. However, we did appear to see more strikes just across the border from Ukraine into Russia, with, for instance, this example of a destroyed Russian artillery piece that was used to fire into neighboring Ukraine. More than a legitimate target. But also in Belgorod, Russian aircraft accidentally dropped 3 more of their FAB precision-guided aerial munitions, now making the total to bringing it to 78 incidents of this type in just the last 3 months. And these latest 3 incidents were all spotted about 15 kilometers, or about 10 miles, from the border with Ukraine. Now, it is true that Russia takes a quantity over quality approach in their manufacturing process for their weapons production, but it's been well reported by now that fearful Russian pilots don't want to get too close to the Ukrainian airspace for fear of a strike from a Patriot PAC-2 air defense missile, for instance there. But the skies are looking even more grey for Russian aviation soon, because upon the arrival of the F-16 jets coming soon, equipped with their pledged AIM-120D AMRAAM missiles, well, these missiles are somewhat analogous to the Patriot PAC-2 missiles in terms of their same 160 kilometer or so range and a speed of Mach 4, or about Mach 4 or Mach 5, allowing them to engage enemy aircraft exceptionally well. Then also for the Belgorod region, Russian sources released footage of images of their claims of HIMARS, GMLRS, or the GIMLRS rocket debris, and that of the DPICM submunitions, which are used in the 155mm cluster shells. But also, Russian sources reported a Russian base in the industrial district of Shebekino, right around there, which was destroyed as well, with the Russian source also seeming to point to a HIMARS strike as being the reason for this latest incident in the Belgorod region. So as you can see, that recent international commitment to allow the use of Western-provided weapons, quote-unquote, near Kharkiv, appears to have come into effect already. And then in a similar scenario, right next door in the Kursk Oblast, Russian sources claimed that their armoured column advancing from Kursk suffered devastating losses. According to their posts, the first and last vehicles were destroyed, followed by the systematic destruction of the entire column. Now, little more is known about this event so far, but the information did come straight from the horse's mouth. You see, in Russia opening up a new front on their own border, which, apart from their initial invasion's sloppy blitzkrieg work, well, it's more or less the only border clash location on the entire map. And so the Western Allies' permitted usage of many of their weapons platforms onto Russian military sites within Russia equates to quite the boomerang effect or outcome for Russia now. Hindsight's 2020. Then headed to Ukraine now, as in the Kharkiv region, that same border clash location, as Russian sources are now reporting significant Ukrainian counterattacks, claiming their own offensive has stalled. Now, according to Russian Telegram channels, Ukrainian forces are actively targeting Russian positions in Vovchansk and on the Eastern Front direction as well. And it's also been said that the Ukrainian command aims to reclaim areas lost after the May 10th incursion. So the Russian military bloggers cite their own halted offensive for reasons that include the effective isolation of their forces on the battlefields, also Ukrainian drone attacks hindering infantry movements, and inadequate counter-battery warfare capabilities. Additionally stated was that Russian forces are facing concentrated Ukrainian assaults on their warehouses, headquarters, and air defense systems. Of course, this comes all alongside Ukraine's reported use of HIMARS rockets and other ammunition effectively against Russian columns. It's almost as if the AFU is no longer fighting with one hand behind their back in the north, as per French President Macron's former recent wording and concerns. In fact, in his very hand at the time, expressing those concerns was this very piece of the map. So all of this seemingly marks a significant shift in the Kharkiv region, with active efforts by Ukraine to push Russian troops out. But then to quickly add a counterbalance to all that information, with information from the other side, as a Ukrainian Telegram channel also expressed the same basic sentiment on the ground, stating, quote, "In the Kharkiv region, the picture is generally improving in our favour. The guys have a lot of ammo on HIMARS and different rockets." Then he goes on to say, quote, "Magyar has pulled up in the direction, and these are not only effective FPV drone crews, but also powerful EW and RBM systems," referring to electronic warfare systems deployed and radar-based monitoring as well. And these two systems were mentioned together because when used in combination with one another, they become highly effective in detection and tracking of various objects or signals. Not to mention, Magyar and his FPV drone unit are very good at what they do. Then headed across on the map to Chasiv Yar, or Russia's eastern offensive operations, as Russian forces continue attempts to take the town, with instances of their shed tanks or turtle tanks being deployed and destroyed, and even one such example of what appeared to be a single Russian MTLB armoured fighting vehicle getting lost as it, all by its lonesome, came too close to the front lines, and then was pretty quickly repelled by Ukrainian fire. Then taken around, bit of a look on the map, somewhere in the east, north and south, drones of the 36th Marine Brigade destroyed Russian engineering equipment during the construction of trenches. Then also another Russian T-80 BV tank destroyed, this one near Novomikhailivka. Then also, thank our lucky stars, another Mr. S SPG also destroyed. Getting a little bit more rare now these days, to say the least. And I should qualify that statement, not because Ukraine is getting worse at targeting these machines, but instead very likely due to there simply being less machines to target. Then, once again, we saw another bit of drone-on-drone action over southern Ukraine. So, seen here, a Ukrainian FPV successfully chases down and intercepts a Russian Orlan 10 reconnaissance drone. Then, as I like to mix things up a bit, somewhere in the east, a destroyed Ukrainian M777 howitzer was spotted. But on a closer inspection, it was just a cheap decoy, fulfilling its mission instead. And I'm a real big fan of a lot of the decoy work done in Ukraine. For instance, seen here, Ukrainian military decoys on their production process, a HIMARS, a Humvee, a BMP-2, a Starlink terminal even, another M777, and even ATGMs. So constructed mostly from a combination of wood, metal rods, and paint. And usually can be repaired in no time at all. Then moving across to a bit of news or information updates today, so we'll start off with this first one. So published satellite images reveal that Russia has concentrated a significant portion of its strategic long-range strike aircraft in the Olenya airfield in the Murmansk region. I might just pop back up to the map to show you guys that one there. So nearly 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine's borders. Now, as of last month, the airbase hosted 12 Tu-95s, 13 Tu-22s and 1 Tu-60, and 2 AN-12 military transport aircraft. Now, Alenia Air Base has been a main base for Russian aerospace forces during massive missile strikes on Ukraine, and with the presence of the AN-12's aircraft, the transport aircraft, being located there, more than likely suggests they were used for missile deliveries for the airfield. Now, Ukraine drone range records have reportedly now flown up to 1,800 kilometers in range, so just shy of this location. But we also have many sources now suggesting that Ukraine will reach ranges of 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers by the end of 2024, just this year. So it squarely puts this important airfield in range. So on the balance of probabilities, we are likely to see activity here at some point, followed by the continued presence of activity. Then headed to some throwback news, because today marks the 28th year since Ukraine relinquished its nuclear power status. As in 1996, Ukrainian authorities transferred the last of the nuclear missiles to Russia, in compliance with the Budapest Memorandum, something that was signed by Ukraine, Russia, the US, and the UK in exchange for Ukraine's own security guarantees. Now, all of these years later, one of the very signatories of the Budapest Memorandum is doing just the opposite of providing said security guarantees, which is only made worse by the fact that Ukraine handed over 43 of the long-range strike aircraft, like that of the Tu-95s and Tu-160s, to Russia, some of which are very, very likely being used 3 decades later to actually strike into Ukraine with. So there it was, signed, sealed, and irrelevant, with Ukraine giving up the world's third largest nuclear weapon stockpile in exchange for the safety guarantees that it never got. And so here's the thing, Putin has quite the track record now, not just with this, but many other things as well, but quite the track record of not adhering to many international agreements. And information like this needs to be taken on board when you consider ceasefires, Minsk agreements, security agreements, and so much more. Then headed across to a funny that I could have legitimately put in the Russian hardware news update segment, and that line is getting extremely blurred now. So take a look here. This one is Russia's latest release, Cope Cage motorcycles, complete with rusted tin roof from repurposed materials. Ooh, not bad. I never fancied Russia big on recycling, but not exactly standard issue military transport stuff. I also love how this photo was taken amid the backdrop of some sort of scrapyard, but it must be stated, before something like this even existed, you know what was potentially the good feature about Russia using motorcycles? It was their speed and agility, theoretically, plus their tiny surface area for incoming attacks. But all of that now gone. So now they have these rusty and less maneuverable tin cans, but with none of the armor of a tank or infantry fighting vehicle, or even a semi-armored 4x4 infantry mobility vehicle. And ultimately, in the larger picture, if tanks have issues with FPV drones these days, then this tiny little rust bucket has its concerns as well. Particularly as the operator of this vehicle is still overly exposed. Though perhaps a prototype, as it's not much good without an engine either. And that's where we move on to the next contraption, the next concept, because that first one wasn't even a one-off. As this second one, seemingly more impressive, but actually no rusted tin roof on top at all, just an expanded roof footprint with chicken wire and camo netting. Though of course, this one will stick out like a sore thumb to any drone. Not to mention, those FPV drone operators of the airfield are just going to come in from the side, the front, or the back, the wheels, whatever it takes to put these motorcycles out of action. And I haven't even yet considered the type of protection it would need to protect itself against some shrapnel blasts. It's like a low-budget Mad Max remake, simply using old motorbikes found laying around in someone's yard or shed. So Russia continues to outdo themselves even after all this time. Just wow. So thanks again for watching, guys. Please continue to like and comment, and like I say these days again, once again, subscribe to the channel if not already. It really does help boost out the channel. and thus push out the wider message to more people. And thanks again for all of the support. It really is the cornerstone to helping this channel keep going on. So thanks again, guys. Can't thank you enough. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.